I'm Daniel Tullian Meldanin, and thank you once again for joining me. My name is Lord Aramil, and today we're talking about D&D, so roll for initiative. And as always, I include a fur baby. Say hello, Louis. You are now on the internet. Yes, perfect. Look at this baby boy. Look at this good boy. Now this is a proper familiar. Not a wizard's familiar. Definitely more of the ranger or druidic variety. He's a very active boy, and does not like being kept in one room. So you can imagine that they had a little bit of difficulty, getting used to everything when we started just keeping all the cats indoors. Because before then, of course, they go in, out, all in about 5 minutes, and then, they'd run out into, a plot hole. So now they're indoors almost constantly, except for yesterday, where Louis escaped out into the beyond. Hello, Teru. Welcome back. Now what Louis didn't realize at that point was that Ashenra was over with Roger again. Okay, I'll let you go now. So Louis takes about 10 steps out of the door, and suddenly there's a very large dog who's very interested in sniffing this small creature. Now, Roger's an absolute sweetheart and would never hurt a cat. But Louis didn't know that, and you can bet he was back inside before the door shut. So, very much, while he enjoys the wide-open plains over the Underdark, he's not exactly an adventurer. So, today, though, we are going to be talking about D&D and adventuring. So grab a pint, and let's talk some nerdy shit. Now, I know that a D&D-based podcast is perhaps the least original thing besides doing, Minecraft videos. And I pride myself on my originality, which is why I just watched half an hour of John Mulaney, and hopefully I'll be able to mimic a few of his speech patterns. But I've been playing D&D for a while. Let's see. My dad started playing D&D back when THAC0 was a thing. That's to hit AC 0 for newer players. That's like AD&D, so like V1, V2. Okay, so you know how we're on 5th edition. Yeah, we're talking about way back. And it was THAC0, or to hit AC 0 again, because AC was inverted. So the lower your AC was, the better. And I remember seeing some very old monster manuals, which would have very powerful monsters having an AC of like -2. And it was confusing. Of course, my dad introduced me to D&D at a very, very young age. I could read, but that was about it. He sacrificed this little red booklet, and a few very old gamers will understand what I'm getting at here when I say that, this little red booklet, this is original D&D, all right? There was no separation between races and classes. Alright? You could be a level 4 elf. And that gave you spells. If you were a magic user, yeah, not a wizard, not a sorcerer, a magic user, then you had like 3 spells a day, and I think you had your choice of weapon proficiency. You could be proficient with the dart, the dagger, or the staff. So make those spells count, and maybe consider a level in. I think it was still fighter at the time. Fighter's fucking universal, I swear. You could also be a level 2 or 3 halfling, yeah. Or not a rogue, a thief. It was very specific. Oh, yeah. So this little red booklet was everything in about, I don't know, maybe 50, 60 pages. So it was the races and classes, because of course there's no difference here. There was the alignment, which was chaotic, neutral, and lawful. We didn't get a good evil axis on that until at least AD&D. So lawful were good people, and chaotic were bad people. And ooh, that takes some nuance out of it, or has yet to add nuance into it. And then, you have your equipment, most of which I could not pronounce correctly. I mean, I was probably 8, honestly, somewhere around there. It's like 8 or 9, and my brother could barely read at all. So, we flip through it and we're like, oh, this is so cool. And we'd make characters. We would roll up characters. We'd never actually play them, but we would roll them up because it was fun and it took like 20 minutes. And it was just it's really interesting looking back on it. It's a really interesting way of developing characters that never get used. And boy, as somebody who's dabbled in creative writing, do I feel that. Now, let's see. I remember a lot of the words I had to speak to other people and have them correct me. One was auguries. Auguries, big hulking things. Built like onions, yes. Yeah, auguries. Definitely auguries. That was a... let's see. For siege engines, there was the trebuchet. Not trebuchet. Or no, it's trebuchet. That's it. A trebuchet. Because French is difficult enough as an adult. And I believe that's French. I could be wrong. I'd have to go back and check. Nuance, either way. Let's see here. Oh, and perhaps my favorite was the pseudo dragon. Pseudo dragon, yeah. Not pseudo dragon. No, this was made out of cheap leather replacement. Suede. Yes. I still remember my friend's father correcting me one day because we were playing over at their house, and the dad's just kind of walking through, and here's Pseudo Dragon. I don't think so. I'm pretty sure that's wrong. Why can't I connect to chat? Let's see here. Like last time, I'm going to have one of my friends on hand to tell me if something is going wrong. Hopefully they are able to do so, as I am potentially having difficulties, but we will find out. Well, it says I've got good internet access, so I shouldn't be having any issues, but everything appears to be buffering strangely. Hello. Okay. Well, I wonder if this is still going? Am I still being recorded and it'll just be added in later, or what do we got here? Come on. I swear, every week I'm going to have a different technical issue, and it's just how I'm going to have to learn to live my life, I think. So, let's see here. I know that Teru is watching, so... Is something wrong with the stream? Yeah, Teru, if you do hear this or whatever, just drop me a message at some point and let me know if things go sideways. Because it says I've got internet access, but I don't have any playback. Okay. Yeah, just if I start acting like something's wrong, Tara, just send me a message, tell me if it's all right. Okay. Where was it? Oh yeah. So here I am, about 8 years old, which is about 2 decades ago, which is terrifying to think about. And my dad hands me this little paperback book. And I mean, yeah, it's got everything. Races, classes, equipment, monsters, an example map from which I can draw more maps. And we destroyed that booklet, which is really painful to think about. Like, for years, we would find, like, pages that had fallen apart out of this booklet, just scattered around our bedroom. Because 8-year-olds can't really take care of fragile items. Especially not when we're, like, running around with this booklet, because there's no way that I can think of, in hindsight at least, to get an 8-year-old, maybe even 5-year-old, okay, an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old to sit down and play a traditional game of D&D. It just, I don't think it can happen. So instead, we played what we called 3D D&D. And that's a really, maybe that's even a nerdier way to say LARP, live action roleplay. So we were LARPing when we were wee little ones, but it was just me and my brother, and he had a character that he always played, and I had, well, everything else. I was the DM. I was the DM back then. It's just, oh, thank you. I can't see everybody who pops in. I For some reason, I'm unable to connect to chat, but welcome, Claren. Good to see you. I wonder if there's any way to reconnect to chat? Maybe pop out chat? So yeah, I definitely had a lot of experience with that. I wonder... it's probably buried still. But I actually found... Okay. Oh, okay, so if I just pop out the chat, it might still be working. Alright, cool. So I found the original world map we created for this little 3D D&D thing. And it has the most cliche place names that I've ever encountered before. And it was, it's what you would expect from a child. I mean, yeah, we're like 8, 9, 10, maybe upwards to 12. We played this for a while. And it was very funny because I don't know where he came up with the character name. I don't know which one of us actually came up with the name. But his character's name is very simply EA. That was it. EA. Just pure and simple. And it wasn't a reference. I need to keep that very clear. That this wasn't a reference to Electronic Arts. Because we didn't have any, like, video games like that growing up. We had a few computer games, but I don't think we had any EA games. No, we just played EA. Or 3D D&D, whatever we wanted to call it at the time. And, yeah. So, that was my first experience being a DM. And eventually we moved on to AD&D, or Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. Ooh, we felt pretty good about that. So now you could be a race and a class. Ho ho. There was the Player's Handbook, the Dungeon Master's Guide, and the Monster Manual. All 3 books. 3 separate books. I might even... Do I have one at hand? No, probably not. They also got trashed, but, you know, we were a little bit better then. Oh. So, we continued to play like that for a while. Occasionally we'd bring in other people. And probably when we were like 13 or 14-ish, we got exposed to, I think it was actually 3rd edition. So 3rd edition and 3.5 was a bit of a radical shift. Because suddenly you have skills and feats. Now mind you, our dad didn't explain any of this to us. Our dad played basically AD&D. Straight out. And it wasn't until my friends and I really wanted to have him DM for us that he picked up 3.5. But he'd been buying the books basically since they started coming out. And we now have almost all of the D&D 3.5 books. And I've started collecting my own selection just as kind of, you know, group use. So, my brother and I kind of were left to our own devices to figure out everything. And it came out, we got a rough idea on what was going on. But I think the most difficult part was that we didn't start out with the Player's Handbook. That now, yeah, a lot of you will be very, what? What's going on? No, we started out with the player's guide to Forgotten Realms. Yeah, so we didn't even have the explanation to skills and feats and character origins. We just had, here's all this stuff. You should already know how this works because you should already have the player's handbook. It says somewhere on there that it requires the player's handbook, but we didn't read the fine print. I barely read the fine print now. So yeah, suddenly we are thrust into a whole new world with no context either. Like, I don't know if we knew that Forgotten Realms existed previously to this or not. Maybe as some sort of vague idea, like, oh yeah, Dad has a box set somewhere that says Forgotten Realms on it. But then again, he also has Dark Sun and other things like that, which are, now that's some old stuff. So suddenly we're exposed to all these like pre-built kingdoms, maps, planes of existence. That was new. Yeah, that was completely out of left field as far as we were concerned. Strangely enough, we had a half idea of what psionics were by that time, because there was like this little appendix in the back of the AD&D. It was the AD&D player's handbook, I think. Either the player's handbook or the DMG had a, I want to say it was like 4 or 5 pages on psionics, and it was very odd, and we didn't really understand it very well. But we knew the words, and we knew a few of the powers manifested. I mean, they're just different spells as far as we were concerned. Oh. And I think that was roughly the time we stopped. Well, a little bit after that point is when we stopped doing the kind of 3D D&D LARP thing. Because I know we did for a little bit, because we included some of that. There's a plane called Warrior's Rest, alright, in which endless battle, but every time you die, you go on to someone else's, your killer's team. Basically. You basically are resurrected, and now you're blue team, whatever. And I remember we played around with that, and we used the Draconomicon. But that was about it. So that was like the waning days of these games. And somewhere in there, I started getting friends, which is a novel concept for many nerds, I know. But I slowly amassed a small group who wanted to play D&D. And I was fine with this. I mean, might as well try, right? And it was very rough, the first few attempts. The first few campaigns were I feel like they're always rough. And when you're 14 or 15, they're double rough. Because you don't know how to really pace a story. You don't know how to encourage player behavior without railroading. That was the big thing, is that the first few missions were very not just episodic, but connected, and weren't connected for a good enough reason. So it was just like, go do this thing, because that's what I have planned for today. do it. And at least one point, I tried to use compulsion magic. I forget what they were fighting. I think they were fighting, is it Formians or Fomorians? Always get those mixed up. But the ant people. And the queen used some sort of mind control. And I'm not going to say my players rage quit, but we all ended session very sour. So, that campaign ended that session. So, yeah, 14 or 15, you'll learn. That's the big thing, is that early campaigns, especially if you've never played before as a player, it's very difficult to be a DM. And that just needs to be accepted, that being a DM is hard. It's hard work being a DM. Well, I should say it's hard work being a good DM. Not to say that it's not enjoyable, and you might not even realize it's hard work, but I've spent a lot of time poring over books, trying to find, just that right amount of knowledge. To completely segue to a today version, or recent history. What was it? About this time last year, I concluded a long-standing campaign. Now, these characters, we just finished an arc in our current campaign where these characters came back, which is really nice, because sometimes it's just good to have an 11th level character and feel like you're hot shit, because a lot of our campaigns go from like 3rd level to 7th level, and that's about it. And you cap it off at just getting a little bit of power to getting enough power that you can reasonably challenge a lot of power structures. You can't take over the city quite yet, but with a little bit of hard work, you probably could make it. And because of this, I have difficulty, personally as a DM, planning appropriate encounters for higher level characters. Either it's way too easy and the encounter's over in a couple rounds, or it's way too hard and I have to start fudging rolls quickly, or else people are just going to die off and it's going to be very unsatisfying. It's fine if a character dies, but it has to be a satisfying death, I feel. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So this campaign went from, I think, 1st level, because we had a couple new people. So I wanted to give them the full experience, allow them the proper character growth and the power escalation, so they can feel it. So we went from 1st to 11th level through this campaign, which lasted, I want to say, about a year. If the chat is still working, Claren, you might be able to not reprimand. Tell me if you remember how long it lasted. So basically, and I should also amend this by stating that this was an original idea I had for this campaign, alright? I need to say that. If you've seen the most recent Baldur's Gate trailers and whatnot, I need to say that this was an original idea I had. Okay? Alright. Because I had been not only planning this campaign, but we had been playing it and working up towards this whole thing before the first trailer dropped. Alright. Basically, the idea is that the Mind Flayers were constructing these massive towers with these big crystalline beacon things, alright? that shot up from the Underdark. And, okay. Thank you. So these towers just shot up from the Underdark, and were basically impervious to anything, and, you couldn't knock them down from the outside. So it was a very convenient way of saying you have to go in and fuck around with it and interface with the crystal and make it blow up or do whatever. And these crystals were designed as beacons. These towers were just beacons for a massive fleet of illithid ships that lurked in the dark void between stars. Very Mass Effect Reaper style. That I will accept that I had inspiration from, because that's been out for a while. And this is because, I think I was just kind of flipping through Lords of Madness, because, I'm not bored, but I need a good campaign idea for this campaign I'm about to start. And, up until this point, we hadn't fought many aberrations. So, why not? It works. Also, I'm going to try and keep my stream to about an hour this time, instead of an hour and 40. And not just a half hour, because I've got a lot of stories. So, here I am, and it's talking about how there once and will be a massive, illithid empire. And it was so massive, and it did all these crazy things when the stars were going out, basically. So, way in the future. And I don't remember exactly what caused it, but they were undergoing some cataclysm. So they kind of did some massive psionic ritual and just tore a section of their empire and flung it far into the past. So the campaign idea was that the Mind Flayers figured that it was time to start reconquering the multi-universe now. And, I had it so that, the Mind Flayers knew roughly what was going to happen. They had dates where this happened, and this happened, and this happened, and this happened. Cool. But at the same time, there was kind of this ripple effect, so in the original timeline, the player characters didn't exist. And thus, the whole gist of the campaign wasn't so much defeating the Mind Flayers as it was staving off the inevitable conquest of the Forgotten Realms. And here we are, back in Toril. Actually, in Waterdeep. So, it's hard to see, but I have my huge map of Waterdeep that one of my characters, Roz, actually had printed out and laminated for this campaign, which was actually really helpful during the last few sessions. So the idea is that these characters are trying to stave off this invasion, and the good thing is that as soon as the Mind Flayers would encounter such stiff resistance and things starting to diverge from their what they thought was a preordained timeline, they were going to basically freak out and pull back to, figure out what's going on and recalculate, replan. And that was good for the characters. But of course, they didn't know that. They just knew that one of the characters accidentally activated one of the beacons prematurely. Zephyr. And through that, he kind of gained this bond with the crystal. So every morning, he would be awakened by this like reverberation in his chest. And what this was were the pulses that were being sent out to the Dark Fleet. And there was one pulse for every day. And of course, no divination magic or anything would tell them exactly what, but through some investigative efforts, the characters figured out that in like 30 days or so, the Dark Fleet was coming. It would get here. And I gotta say, that was a really, really good idea. A time limit. If you can put in a time limit on your campaign, yes, it means that the campaign will end, really. But at the same time, there was so much tension when the characters would wake up and there were 25 reverberations in their chests and just be almost freaking out. Like, there was no downtime for these characters. It was always boom, 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 we gotta go. Luckily, they made friends with the Wizard of Waterdeep. I almost said Elminster. Kelvin Blackstaff. So, I mean, they kind of also met Elminster. I name-dropped a lot of very important NPCs near the end of the campaign, because why the hell not? I played it up that these characters, the players, were very suddenly thrust into a much larger chess game, and suddenly they had all these very powerful figures kind of looking at them and expecting them to know what's going on. Because, like I said, divination magic wasn't working, and here are these like level 5, level 7 characters who are very suddenly being debriefed by Elminster and Illustrial and Kelvin Blackstaff, people who have spells named after them. And these poor characters, like several of them are just like, our bard, Nordova, she was absolutely in love with Illustrial, Lady of the North, because of course you are. And even the Scion, who was completely... What's a good word for it? He wasn't racist against arcane magic. Dismissive. He was very dismissive of arcane magic. Though he kind of made an exception for the party wizard, because Zephyr had some form of value. But even he was very... Yes, sir. You know, very, very low in comparison to his very highbrow kind of I am imperious and da-da-da-da that he normally had towards arcane practitioners. Where was I going with that? Oh yeah, eventually things all came to a head. All the characters are like 10th level now. For the most part, pretty well kitted up. And they were tasked with helping to defend Waterdeep. Now, somewhere in here, I had been made aware of Spelljammers, which is a really cool concept that really, I feel like, needs to come back in full force to D&D. So, a Spelljammer, that's one word. It's basically D&D in space. And it made my life significantly easier knowing that word. It's really fun. So I gotta... There are actually some very helpful YouTube videos, and I just wish that I had known about all of that at the beginning of the campaign. Pretty much. And now they're going to show up in a lot more of my campaigns, because they're just awesome. But, let's see here. I had a point to all this. Okay, yes, so they're defending Waterdeep. They watched Elminster and Kelvin Blackstaff perform an 11th level spell to create a permanent portal to, I think it was the Plane of Earth, where they had gone in and cleared out several large caverns for the townsfolk to kind of run away to. Which was maybe a little bit of a cop-out on my part, but I spent like half an hour describing, this build-up of an 11th level spell, that which should not be, as that kind of phrase came up a few times, to the point where, like, the goddess Mistra was there observing, just because two of her chosen are trying to do something that she needs to personally approve of. And I continued to, like, pour on this kind of drama and whatnot. And I even talked about how this physically exhausted both Elminster and Kelvin, who were, up until this point, very much portrayed as they should be, almost godly in their own right. So, I think at one point, as they were walking to the ritual, Kelvin or Elminster was talking to the wizard. I'm glad you enjoyed it, Claire. And it's like, well, you know how the crafting of a proper portal to another plane can take months, right? Yes, sir. We're going to do it tonight. Oh. So it was a fun time. It was. Sometimes I really wish that we had recorded the sessions, not to put on YouTube because that seems a little bit too. Well, there was a lot of, off-rail chatter in these sessions also, but just so that I could go back and listen to a few of these parts, even though I hate the sound of my own voice, like Clarence said, it was so cool. It was a really good session, I feel. But, yeah, the battle for Waterdeep went very well for the characters. A little too well, really, because I had planned out the battle, alright? I had planned out the battle, like, this is what would happen if the characters did nothing. If they just left the city now, took their shit, and went home. Alright? Ignoring the fact that they kind of lived in Waterdeep at this point. But, whatever. Doesn't matter. So I figured that the city would last for about 7 days, and then the remainder of the characters would use a portal that is in Castle Waterdeep that leads to Silvery Moon to escape. Why are people having difficulty with my stream? My YouTube channel. If anybody else is having difficulty with my stream, please let me know. Not that you can, because you're already here. Something is dinging, and I don't know what. Can I just copy and paste? Oh, no. Hopefully that works. We'll find out. So here we are. Yeah, it took about 7 days for the Mind Flayers to slowly, and the idea was that they were slowly just kind of making a beachhead and then just sending in minions over and over and over and over again, and just wearing out the defenders. Kind of the idea is that while the Dark Fleet is massive, they're trying to do a planetary invasion. So they're not going to send all their forces to one location, and they're also not going to waste any Mind Flayer lives if they can help it, because minions are cheap. And I was using the Mind Flayers of Thune from Monster Manual 4 or 5. So they have a bunch of like constructs that they could spit out, hundreds of a day. So why the hell not? Might as well just kind of send in the constructs, make them fight soldiers, do your job. Come on. So it was kind of this slow grinding away of the Waterdeep defenders until like Kelvin and his apprentices and other like big named characters were like, okay, the castle is about to fall, time to Amscray. And just like, I'm going to use all of my spells remaining and then book it through the portal. And then collapse portal on the other side. Yeah, you're welcome. The point is that, though, the characters had no intention of allowing the Dark Fleet to start landing troops. Like I'd kind of expected. I'd kind of planned for this, like, defense of the city kind of idea. But no, of course not. Yeah, Ashenra is also watching now and is messaging me like, they never got that far, bitch. No. Instead, they had their own small spelljammer, okay? So imagine a nautilus shell the size of a small house with, like, tentacles coming out of it. And, yeah, you've basically got an Illithid spelljammer. Cool. At least how I imagined them. By the way, Ashenra, you're using Megan's YouTube. So you know. So instead, the resident Scion, whose whole focus is meta creativity, so he's good at like making, designing, and shaping matter. All right. So what they do is they've got the shell, the spelljammer, and kind of spread out the tentacles a bit. I'm trying to, so kind of a shell and tentacles, yeah. And they enclose the whole thing in glass with a very sharp point at one end, okay? They then take the spelljammer down beneath the waves, because Waterdeep is a port city. It's got deep water in the port. So they zoom out a couple miles, all right? Spelljammers are ridiculously fast, by the way, like thousands of miles per hour. It's pretty interesting in their own regard. But they zip out, they zip up to slightly above the where the Dark Fleet is kind of holding over Waterdeep, at least that section of the Dark Fleet, and then they zip in above and into one of the largest ships that they can see. They just ram it with this glass, which is practically designed to burst out and shatter upon impact. So they basically took a massive syringe, even though the thought makes my skin crawl, and jammed it into the largest ship that they could find. And because all illithidic ships are basically organic in nature, it just pierced right in and through, nearest to, like, where the whole, like, command bridge was. Because the larger Illithic ships are shaped in a very reminiscent of an Imperial Star Destroyer, actually. So, like, it kind of slopes up, and the top of the slope is where the command bridge is, basically. And with the help of some hired guards, basically, they just pierce through, bust in, and wreck the whole command crew, including like, these are now like 10th, 11th level characters. So and Ashenra was a master of making these overpowered astral constructs that were so good at grappling that they beat the Mind Flayers at their own game. At one point, near the end of the battle, he summoned like 2 or 3 of these things, and they literally just took the Elder Brain by the tentacles and ripped it in twain. And it was absolutely disgusting and so gratifying for everyone involved except me, who had kind of expected that encounter to last a lot longer. And by the time the Dark Fleet had reorganized and figured out what was going on, they were booking it out of there with their new, bigger Spelljammer. And to deal with it, you know, they zipped over Waterdeep, you know, kind of doing this, not telepathy so much as just sending a message ahead. It's like, hey, we're the one in front, but you should definitely destroy the ones behind us, please. And so they kind of zip over the castle, and Kelvin's like, okay, we're going to target that one out of the sky, and that one out of the sky, and that one out of the sky. And rays of destruction and whatnot, because he's fucking Kelvin Blackstaff. And to deal with all the other Mind Flayers on the ship, they sealed the compartment that they were in, and pulled an FTL move, where they opened all of the doors, and they just sank into the harbor for a couple hours. I'm just like, okay, the bubble should be stopping about now. Let's call it good. And this kind of bullshittery continued throughout the battle. The battle lasted, I think, and Ashenra, if you can remember, it lasted like 2 days, 3 maybe, before they had done so much damage. No, it was only like 2 days. Like they did most of the damage the first day, and then they kind of like cleaned up the second. And after like so much of their fleet had been destroyed before they had, you know, even figured out what was going on, Mindflayer was like, we need to rethink this real quick. It sounds far less satisfying than it did, but like each hour in game, 1.5 days, yeah, like each hour in game was practically a session. We nuked them on the half day. Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, like it was the weirdest mix, because the Battle of Waterdeep lasted in game, like he said, a day and a half, but it took us the better part of like a month, like maybe a month and a half. I don't know, Clara and Ashenra, if either of you remember how long exactly it took. But it was ridiculously impressive. And I was personally amazed at some of the ingenuity that these characters came up with. So I am running close to the time limit. run for? I don't know. Okay, I think... Yeah. Okay, yeah, it was 9 sessions. Wow. Is it really 9 sessions? Okay, because we run, like, 1 session a week, so that's... like, I think we had an extra session in there. And so that would be, like, 2 months, yeah. So, yeah, imagine, like, a day and a half in-game drawn over 2 months. And up until then, of course, we'd had, like, most of a year building up to this battle. So it was really gratifying, I feel, to not just myself, but to all the players to really get through this and to emerge victorious. And I think that's really what D&D is all about, is coming together and creatively getting through a struggle towards victory. Especially when the DM is challenging, but not expressly against the characters. Like there's a really fine line, I feel. But I feel like if everybody... maybe another day, I should know. But if everybody leaves the session smiling and excited for next week, I've done my job perfectly. I'm actually kind of surprised because I meant to talk about a completely different series of campaigns this week. So, I guess next week I know what I'm doing. We'll be talking about my Eberron campaign, my Eberron canon, because Eberron is like my favorite campaign setting. All right, like this is next to me as I sleep. All right, Eberron is my jam. I love it. So one of the first campaign series I did was an Eberron campaign. And that was the first of, like, 6 campaigns in the same universe, alright? 6 campaigns, not always concurrent, definitely not in the real world. I only ever had one Eberron, well, for the most part, I only had one Eberron campaign at a time. But each one was set in the same world and built off of each other to some extent. There were a few times I had cameos of other characters, which is fun. But and that is ongoing, I should say. And in game, it's been like 30 years or so, give or take. I'd have to go back and check my notes, but you can only imagine what 6 campaigns of adventures messing around in a system can do. So there's a teaser for next week, I guess. So tune in next week as we talk about my messed up Eberron campaign, which has massive Spelljammer-esque, well, airships fighting the Inspired and a huge world war. So, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you have, leave a like, subscribe, share if you'd like, and post in the comments what you really thought. So, until we meet again, dear friends, Antonio Tulien, and farewell.